And we're live with Maya French. How are you, Maya?
Great. How are you, John?
Good. I'm so excited to have you. Maya is a beverage entrepreneur who co founded Koia. She's on to her next adventure, which we'll ask her about.
Mhm.
Um, Koia is an amazing plant based drink in the market, one of the first to go to market, ready to make, ready to drink with all different types of protein. And they have a keto version. And Maya, what are you up to right now?
Yeah. Well, I am. I took a summer off to do the whole quarantine road trip thing, and
Hmm.
now I'm working on my second startup. So at this stage right now, I'm not revealing what it is, but my partner and I, Dustin, we love developing products. So that's where the stage we're at right now, just brand building and working in the kitchen, developing a product. Should be ready to launch towards the end of this year, maybe the summer. Depends on how fast we can work. So yeah, that's what I'm
Very,
up to.
and are you still? We won't get too deep because I know it's a little bit stealth mode. Is it in the beverage space?
Yeah, it is. It's a beverage. I stick to what I know.
And how did you come up with the idea? Like, how did your experience in the beverage space so far impact the general direction that you're headed into?
Yeah, I think because just so in the beverage space, just like my ear to the pavement, I could easily see where the gaps are. It's really fun. It's a huge blessing to live near Erewhon because those are where all the newest products hit first before they like launch out into the world, especially in the natural food space. So you just see where the opportunity is and like, wait, I can achieve that. And also, I think it's really great being able seeing where the opportunities are at retail as the retail landscape is evolving. So really looking at that and coming up with a fun brand that no one's even heard of before, just like pushing the limits is really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and maybe jumping a little bit into your experience at Koya. When did you start that brand?
Yeah. So my partner and I started Koia back in 2013. It was not called Koia when we started it, and it wasn't a protein drink company. It was actually a juice company, and it was called Raw Nature 5. And really funny if you ever want to like look up some what Raw Nature 5 look. What it is, you could look up a clip online, YouTube. Steve Harvey sounds like an adult film, which is the reason we had to change the name because Raw Nature. So like every great I guess entrepreneurial story, we were looking at line extensions for the juice and we were testing out different products, a lot of things that we were like ahead of our time. Like we came out with a yoga drink that would like crush it today, but like didn't no one understood it back then. Eventually, like around that time I found out I was lactose intolerant, so that's where the idea for Koya came about, the protein drinks. We wanted to create a lactose-free protein drink, and people really were not hip to nut milks at that time. So I would say we were one of the first brands to come out with a low sugar, high protein, nut milk based beverage. So that's how we got our start.
And this was in Chicago, and
Yeah.
you have just diving a little deeper into the story. So you have this idea. Were you already friends with Dustin? Were you juicing yourself? Like, what what was the inception point? Like, how did it start?
So I was always friends with Dustin and I had been friends for like 2 years now. We met through like his ex girlfriend, totally random. She worked with me. We worked in retail, and he had like other business partners, and they were going to build out juice bars in grocery stores. Like they had contractors and everything. It didn't work out with the partners, and I was his neighbor, so I was always hanging around. Like, what are you up to? Like super curious as I am, and I think like when I started helping him out, that's when we were like, okay, we're gonna start bottling juices and selling them to the grocery stores for a wholesale price. Um, so that was kind of like how we got started. It's so crazy, all these like iterations of ideas that just like grow into this amazing thing over time. And I think from can give you a timeline, the juice bar was like October 2013. By November of 2013, we pivoted to the actual juices, and then by I want to say March of 2014, we pivoted to like full on protein drinks. So
Interesting. So,
yeah,
and you guys kind of were maybe like a pressed juice competitor, and you
yeah.
guys actually had a retail space.
No, we were thinking about it though, but yeah, we just kept wholesaling to different retailers that were locally in the area, like all the health food stores, even getting into some of the gyms, just testing it everywhere.
And in LA, we've seen so many juice companies come and go, and I think it's amazing to look at like a company like Prest and seeing what they've built. Why do you think there's been so much I don't know birth and death in the juice space, and how did you decide to go into the ready to drink protein world?
Yeah, I think for us, it was really realizing that okay, the margins don't make sense. The price point like that we were having it sell it at retail didn't make sense. It was like $8.99 for a 12-ounce juice. The sugar content was like very high. So we saw so many problems. You like looking out into the future that were not sustainable for growth. So that was why we wanted to kind of come up with an idea that was simpler, like less labor intensive. Like imagine like juicing vegetables like every day before you can afford a big juicer, and even then it's like crazy labor intensive, and it was just insane. So that was kind of like our idea, and I think a lot of companies, the reason why they fail is that they hold on to these ideas, that they like their initial idea, and they're so married to it that they can't think outside of it, and they're like afraid to pivot. That's like the number one thing I see in
Mm.
most companies.
Yeah, I experienced that myself, and I talk about it a lot. It's like for us, the mission and the North Star mattered more than the product and the vehicle towards getting there. There's plenty of vehicles you can jump on. Towards for us is like making healthy living and well-being more accessible and affordable. And as long as you are bullish on seeing that North Star come to light, then some amazing things can happen. I still remember the first time I met you. I think it was like pre-COVID. I think it was a CPG meetup event in LA, and I was just like, "Who is this amazing, wonderful spirit? She's
Thank
so
you.
excited and happy. I need to be friends with her." So we've kept in touch over the years, and we caught up, and we were talking about um, Black History Month. We were talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and I thought it could be cool to maybe switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about that. So, a little bit of context. I wanted to talk to you. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was about how your unique background, culture, identity contributed and gave you somewhat of a competitive edge in starting Koia and being an entrepreneur, and now leading you to your next venture. And the anecdote I said, from my background, I'm Iranian American or Persian, and growing up, I used to be really ashamed of being Persian. My parents would be speaking Farsi in the grocery store, and I would tell them to shut up, be quiet, because I was worried about other people like knowing that I was Iranian. Now I look at it as a competitive advantage. Our brand name is actually a Farsi word. So I'm curious whether you can share a little bit about your own journey and in that light.
Hey, and by the way, I just want to say, like, that's amazing that your name is a Farsi word, because that, like, brand recognition is so important. Just for people like even your culture and outside of it, it's just like really great. So congratulations on that. But I think like for me personally, just I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Like I grew up in a food desert. So like food accessibility was like really important to me to like, create a product that was that can be understood by many, and even afforded by many, and like be in those spaces that most natural brands aren't, like a Walmart or a Target or a 7-Eleven. So I think we joke about this thing of like living in the coastal cities, and like you live in your own little bubble, and like you really don't know what's happening in middle of America. But like the advantage for me is like growing up and knowing those struggles, and like really also knowing how to speak to that consumer in their tone, and like a relatable tone of voice was so important. So I think that those are ways that like maybe my culture and my background have like contributed to ongoing success.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And then did that affect your business strategy and your go like how did that then play out in terms of how you connected with those consumers? So you get a deal, let's say with 7-Eleven. Did you go into did you do some grassroots marketing and a push in order to then go there and connect with those consumers and to educate them, or did it affect your partnerships? How did that then play out? Because what I'm hearing is like not you understood how to sell not just to the elite customer that's shopping at Erewhon. You decided to go in, get mass and national distribution and kind of speak to that consumer.
Yeah, exactly. It's so important, and it's like a lot of brands like don't do that because they are so used to speaking to an elite customer. But for any brand that I create, even like Koya, is just simplifying it so that people can understand that it's so important. So like for things with Target, like we definitely did like huge influencer pushes early on, and these influencers aren't the typical like the New York rich girls or like LA rich girls that have like the world. Like these are normal people, and I feel like their audiences are more engaged, just like the micro influencer who like lives in the middle of Kansas or Michigan, and she's not like super famous, but she's like popular in her hometown, or and I think that's so important to be able to like resonate with those people and have them be champions of your brand, and like knowing how to speak to those people and not feeling like as a brand you're above those people, because those are going to be your biggest cheerleaders at the end of the day.
And how did that same idea play into like how you grew your team, for example?
Yeah, well, with that same idea is like you definitely, when you're building teams, you want to build that early on. You want to have those values. Like I value a diverse team. I value a diverse set of like opinions and creativity, that can come from people of different ages or like genders and cultural backgrounds. I think that's so important, and it really helps like an organization move forward versus like having a bunch of sheep. Everybody's all the same, or everyone is just like listening to one person, not really free thinkers. When you have like a free thinking organization with like different perspectives, the possibilities are endless for an organization.
And as you zoom out, and you're no longer at Koya, but you're probably on LinkedIn, part of the business conversation. And I think something that's been really exciting in the HR and people ops space is that diversity and inclusion initiatives are becoming really popular. They're at the forefront. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, now that you're looking at all that, maybe outside the organization, what do you think companies are getting right? And what do you think they're getting wrong? Or there's still a lot of room for improvement and
It is like a trend now to be, I guess, diverse and include yourself in the conversations of what's going on culturally. But what I see brands failing is really not taking initiative to have employees that are diverse. That's still an issue. I think that brands can do a better job of like seeking these employees and not really just giving opportunities to people that are in your immediate network. Because there's a ton of great talent in places you wouldn't even think to look. Like I love the brands that are like going to career fairs or like HBCUs, or like seeking talent in like Middle America. Like that's really amazing. Or even having programs where you're mentoring somebody who has a ton of potential but maybe come from like an underserved community. I think those are really, really great programs, but I do not agree with brands who include themselves in the conversation about cultural issues and they just don't take that initiative to make sure that their team is diverse. And you really have to like build that into your brand ethos early on and show that it's something that you value, not through your words but through your actions.
Yeah, so walking the talk overall. How as a founder was it? What were the challenges in doing that? Like what, or was there challenges in terms of putting those ideals and those values and those beliefs into practice?
Yeah, I mean, I often see a lot of people, they don't, they don't see that what they're doing is wrong. They feel like they're making an effort when in fact they're not really. Or even if you try to put like different perspectives into like the creative work of like branding and like, tone of voice and like including yourselves when you can into these conversations or being culturally relevant, some people don't see the value in that, and that's when it can be really tough, and that's why it's important to have multiple people on your team from different diverse backgrounds to kind of like back you up and like, hey, I understand, or you feel comfortable enough to speak up about these things in the first place. Because I see a lot of people who might be like the token person, like you could be the only Persian person in your organization with a lot of people from like a different cultural background, and you like saying that you won't feel confident enough to like state your idea, and it could be like a really great life changing business changing idea, but you won't feel confident enough to speak up because you just don't feel like you are an equal in that society, even though you're still an employee there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sort of thinking about you as an entrepreneur, how, like, when did you know that was like, were there any challenges that you had put in front of yourself in terms of thinking that you could be a part of the conversation? Like, as you were coming out of college, did you know that you were going to start a business, or like, and what, I guess what I'm asking is like, what kind of perceived barriers were there you getting into the business, maybe connected to culture and race? And then did those actually play out the same way that you thought they would when push came to shove?
Yeah, I think like for me there were so many stages. Like I lived in Chicago, the south side of Chicago. I didn't even feel comfortable like walking downtown to get a job because I didn't feel like they would accept me. So it was like kind of overcoming self first, and like these perceived barriers in your mind that like people won't accept you because you're different from them. So that was always a challenge. Even like sitting in rooms, like sitting in boardrooms, like sitting like with people that are worth like millions and millions of dollars, and like being afraid to speak up because you feel like the thing that you have to say isn't intelligent, or afraid to ask questions because like maybe everyone else knows the answer except for you. So just like slowly over time, I think as I began to learn more and feel more comfortable in those environments, that's when I felt comfortable to like speak up, and state my opinion and feel more confident. And even like, I think for me, a pivotal point was like gaining Forbes 30 under 30 and like having that like national recognition of like the work that I've achieved, like me and my partner achieved over the years. And like really, when you're in the thick of it, you don't see how grand it is. That's what a lot of things are. You have to take a step outside of yourself and be like, oh my God, I did a good job. So that a lot of confidence can come from that too. Just like even taking a step back and like showing gratitude to yourself for all of the hard work that you've done.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if there was any like pivotal moments where that was debunked. And I love that you brought up the example of Forbes 30. Were there any people that helped you along the way, sort of deconstruct those limitations, or that you had put on yourself? Any mentors or folks, or maybe even any books or things that you read that sort of got you over the hump? And I asked that with the broader context of a question around any advice you have to other, founders of minority backgrounds that are interested in entrepreneurship and starting businesses.
Yeah. Well, from that, I think perspective, I would say, I think even with like being a Black person, we don't feel comfortable setting ourselves in environments of people that don't look like us a lot of the time. So if that is the case, like, you know, take a leap of faith and be more comfortable to be yourself. Like, people will accept you for you. And like, don't be afraid to make friends who don't look like you, who aren't the same age as you, because in this industry, like the natural food and beverage industry, there are wonderful people. And like, I've had friends and mentors, people that are like 30, 40 years older than I am, because like what everyone is. And like, and they've helped me so much along my journey. Like little things, like I think the best help I've had are people that are like hard on me, but it's like constructive criticism, and they like tell me like how I can do better, because I don't ever want to think that I'm like, I don't ever believe that I'm like doing like an excellent job, but like if I receive it in a constructive way, like constructive criticism, I'm more likely to believe it. But like again, I wouldn't have that opportunity if I didn't feel comfortable like speaking to these people and like being around these people and like showing my personality off, and really connecting with people by being my authentic self.
Yeah, and in the early days of us starting a company, I don't know if it's exactly the same as that, but like we would almost crave individuals who would rip our idea apart, but in a constructive way where you were like almost you were ready to go back for more. And you knew that every time you'd have a meeting with that mentor or that advisor, that you would learn more and more, because they would rip things apart, but in a way that where you were incentivized and excited to
Mm-hmm.
go back to the drawing board and to ideate and iterate. And so that's really cool to hear. Um, Zooming out a bit, as you think about maybe just like the future and what you're most excited about as it pertains to both natural foods, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and then maybe where those things come together, um, which I think is something that both of us are really passionate about and why we're friends, around just greater access and affordability to well-being. What gets you most excited about your own role and about the role of business?
Yeah, I think now that we have some representation in the industry, people are you see a lot more people feeling more confident coming out with their ideas and like pushing their ideas forward, and we're seeing a lot of great like cool innovation. Like I'm like just found like a tapache drink, which is really cool. Like that's comes from like, you know, it's a traditional Mexican fermented drink, and it's like brought to America. Like all these ideas, like there's this Ellis Island tea, like something like that. It's like her grandmother's Jamaican recipe. So that really gets me excited, because now we're being exposed to like all these foods from like different cultural backgrounds, and then that's being, you know, spread out in their neighborhood, is being spread out with elite. It's like being spread out everywhere. So now everyone's like everything's more accessible. Everyone's more knowledgeable and more curious and excited about how traditional foods can be healthy.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I love that. Like, I think I've seen the same punch drink that you're talking about. Another product I love is the a lot. I think it's Alafia soaps. Alafia soaps. It's like it's yeah, like the shea butters and such, and with a lot of investment into communities in Africa, I
Mhm.
believe. Um, and that's like I think there's something about taking products or things that are widely regarded and maybe even have these beneficial properties, healing properties in other cultures, and making them cool, making them accessible, but in a way that doesn't disregard where they came from.
Yeah.
There's like that whole story. I remember when quinoa was getting big, people were saying like, yeah, but now the indigenous peoples cannot even eat quinoa because it's elevated the price. So I think it's like this interesting balance, right? Where you can bring these things to light and you can bring, but it's also respecting where they came from.
Yes, and giving back to where they came from, not just like taking those resources and using them for your own benefit of like capital gains. You really need to like have an initiative to give back, and that goes into like what our new generations, like Gen Z, millennials, like what we care about is like, does your company have this type of mission behind it? Like, are you guys doing something greater than just like trying to sell me a product? That's really important too.
Yeah, and then there, I think there is also the caveat of I spoke to I think I was mentioning to you Every Table, which does dynamic pricing when it comes to food, and it's built in the social impact is built into the business model, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like something like Tom's, which has gotten its own ounce of criticism around like a buy one give one.
Yeah.
Because that's not necessarily addressing the core root issue, but it's more of like a form of charity.
Yeah.
So that's also another sort of interesting conversation, I think, in all of this to think about. Maya, this has been so much fun. Anything else that you'd like to leave us with before we sign off today?
Um, I don't know. I just want to say that, thank you for having me here and talking about these important issues and being able to share our thoughts with the world. It's such a great opportunity. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Maya. I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you, and sorry for the technical difficulties.
You're fine. Have a good one. Thank you.